Hello, and welcome to another episode of Speak Greasy. Today, we're championing a young lady whom I've had the pleasure of working with and knowing for the last few years, Shuli Ghosh. She is one part of a mother-daughter duo who started the Sienna Cafe in Calcutta. When a generational artist and a passionate foodie create a business, there's bound to be a beautiful success, and I can't wait to hear more. Welcome to the show, Shuli. So great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So listen, you are one quiet Wonder Woman. Thank you for making the time to even come on the podcast. I know you're not, you're very shy about promoting your brand, which I'm really mad at you about because you should be talking about it a lot more. It's one of my favorite. And by the way, I'm wearing a Sienna dress. I pretty much live in your clothes. The first time I came to Sienna, it literally, and I've read this about the cafe, so I'm clearly not the only person who thinks this, but it really is like a warm hug. You walk into that space and there is such a, beautiful, calm vibe. It's genuinely got a really amazing positive energy. So I don't know what magic you're doing there, but that's what we're here to learn all about. Take us right to the beginning. Tell us your story, right from the very start.
When we started Sienna, it was basically to promote and, all of the creative work that was happening in our workshop in Shantiniketan, which is a ceramic workshop that my mother had started almost 30 years ago. She's an architect, she's art collector, she's generally a very artistic person. So as my sister, I've grown up in a household of artists. And although I did, she never, always discouraged me to study the arts because she wanted me to have a secure future. And so I fought with her to study English literature. And when I came back to Calcutta, I noticed that this workshop that I'd gone to growing up and spent really lovely months there making pottery, painting on pottery, was kind of lying dormant. It didn't have any sort of marketing space. There was no shop really in a city where there would be more exposure. So I suggested to her that we open a store together in Calcutta and let's see what happens. And I'll stay for a few months and then go and do my master's in the US. We decided, okay, let's open this space in Hindustan Park, which is this lovely residential neighborhood, which is very close to my grandmom's house. So we've grown up in the area. This older couple was deciding to leave their home and move out, and the space was available, and in true Shanta Ghosh fashion, she went and bought the space and then gave me a call and said, I found the perfect space and I don't have time to show you, but I think it's perfect for the store and we should go ahead with it. So we went full in, and then we basically decided to just design a store that would sort of mostly have space for the pottery, but maybe some crafts from Bengal, in and around of Bengal, and Shantiniketan mainly because that's where our workshop is, and that's basically a culture and craft hub where there's a lot of folk art and craft. So that was the idea, and then, and through just casual conversations, I told her, should we just serve some tea and coffee and some, baked goods, maybe while people, they can linger in the store longer, and then we can serve it in our pottery, and that would really help maybe bring the focus back to the pottery. And it started off that way, and my mom has many talents. One of them is that she's a really good cook, and she used to make all these really fun, salads and soups and fun sandwiches at home. So I said, there's really a gap in Calcutta, in this kind of very casual, clean food that's available in cafes. There's not many spaces like that. So I really think maybe that'll be a nice, offering for people. So she said, I don't think surely anyone is going to come and have salads. They want fried food and they want tele bhaja and they want, kachoris and aloo and all of that. So I was like, there are many spaces in Calcutta that offer that. There are classic traditional spaces that already do that very well. And I don't want to get into that. We are not professional cooks. So she said, okay, let's take a chance. And literally one day when there was no one else in the space, she went behind the counter, whipped up this avocado salad. And I said, we have to have avo on toast. That's probably what's going to do it. And she did her very basic avocado salad, but it was something we were used to having at home. And from there, we sort of evolved into a menu that had like, a pumpkin soup and, things that were comforting. But because we were not professional chefs, we didn't, really delve deep into the technical aspects. We just wanted to do something that was comforting, and it was supposed to be just a stop on the way to the store. And then over time, the store.
Yeah. So I'm gonna pause you
Yeah,
there
sure.
because I have all these questions in my mind. See, what was she was running a workshop there in Shantiniketan in well before you got involved. So what was the output of that, or what was the goal behind that workshop?
So she and her sculptor friend, Prabhash Sen, basically wanted this initiative to encourage the local artisans in the neighboring area to keep sort of practicing this traditional art of pottery making, which is also not using molds, but throwing the clay onto a potter's wheel. And this area at that point had nothing around. There was no electricity even in the area. So it was a very sort of barren, tough space to work with. But they decided to open this workshop where her sculptor friend was also teaching them ways to glaze and use ceramic glazes over terracotta pottery. And the idea was to just keep this craft alive, create some beautiful traditional pottery, but also give them a livelihood. So it was started with that initiative. But I think because it didn't have much exposure, it was sort of not sustaining itself. And so we had, I think the store in Calcutta kind of helped bring back focus to that and gave it this sort of marketplace.
You were like the business mind without, I think, realizing it. But, you really did give that sort of craft a sort of business, avenue in a way, right? So again, there's the ceramic part of it. But of course, textiles, as we're both showcasing, was a very big part of, what your mother started as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
So my grandfather started this trust that basically works with, NGOs and does training programs in rural areas for stitching and, all kinds of crafts, essentially, and works with the Ministry of Textiles or any government body that gives these grants to do this kind of outreach program. So through that, we did this workshop on batik dyeing and block printing. And out of that workshop, there were a few ladies who were really interested in continuing that work. And so the both of us were thinking, okay, maybe we should just give them some employment and start just a few textiles. Again, it was started with not a very big idea or plan in mind. It was just that, okay, we'll start a small workshop, and it is still relatively small. But what we do now is, I kind of found a channel for my design desires, I guess. And I decided, okay, maybe we can design a few more contemporary, textiles that we could sort of pair with our ceramics and the crafts that we're selling in Siena. So it started off that way, and now we have about 5 people in the workshop who are basically using traditional batik dyeing processes and block printing processes to print on all Bengal handloom fabric. The textile is definitely very unique to Bengal. Bengal is lucky. I mean, we're lucky to have that access to very good quality muslin and cotton in Bengal. So a lot of designers, a lot of people in the textile world do work in and out of Calcutta. So even though we don't have our own loom, we work very closely with weavers all over Bengal. And then we bring it all into our workshop. And the prints that I sort of work with, because again, I'm not a trained textile designer, so it's all very instinctual and I'm inspired by nature or some sort of motives. But now I'm working closely with my sister, who's a graphic designer, and she's sort of helping us make more contemporary, interesting motifs that she does through lino cut, and she makes these stamps, and then I transfer them into some sort of traditional process here because she lives in the US. So she, and the idea is now, because we have the restaurant, I try to think of prints that are maybe of ingredients that we use in the restaurant. Or
I have the fish dress, so
we love our fish, as you know, in every way. So we use it on our textiles and of course on our dishes as well.
So you've clearly got the business side and you've got the creative side in terms of, you're designing gorgeous clothes. That is a very unique combination to have. And I think that, that's definitely translated into what you've created at the cafe as well. But as you said, it started out as a store, and the food was kind of an accessory to that shopping experience. Today, Sienna is something very, very different. And I know you just went through a complete overhaul as well in terms of renovating the property, and congratulations on 10 years of Sienna as well. But what does that sort of evolution look like for you? Are you still craft first and food second? Is it sort of, is there room for both? What do you identify Sienna, the brand, with today?
If you look at it in just terms of business, the restaurant business, now it's a restaurant and not only a cafe. And we have a tasting menu that we're working on. So that bit has taken over the business side, definitely. But I think in terms of, in the brand sense, we do want to constantly connect the two, because I think it's a unique capability that we have as an organization. And the fact that we can actually design our own tableware now that we're also focusing so much on the ingredients and the region and the diversity of the region, it really is wonderful that the ceramics are also made with the same soil that we use the food comes out of and the ingredients come out of. So, I mean, just recently we are now sort of developing a tasting menu, which we'll launch soon, hopefully in a month or so. And our head chefs, Avinandan and Koel, came with us to our workshop, and we spent a couple of sessions just designing the ceramics and plates together, which I think is a really fascinating and exciting process and project that we can do together because we have that workshop, and that's how we started. That's why we started in the first place as well. So I think there's room for both, hopefully.
It's true. Like the idea of a shopping experience in a restaurant or cafe isn't something new. I mean, we see this in like Goa, you see this in, it's very common. But I think what's unique, as you said, is that it's your creation. Both the restaurant and, the craft is entirely you. It's not just something that you're sort of housing in your space, but it's actually part of the brand, right? By the way, Sienna, what's behind the name?
So Sienna refers to burnt sienna, which is the color of clay. And because we started with pottery, and at that point there was very little thought about a restaurant or food, we called it Sienna. Actually, my sister came up with the name. And now it sort of encompasses everything we do from Bengal and the region, because the soil now is the connecting factor between the food and the ingredients. So it kind of is now Sienna Calcutta. We used to be Sienna Store and Cafe, but now I think we're this all-encompassing, representation of the diversity of Bengal and the region through craft and also food. So, yeah, that's how the name.
It's beautiful. You talk about Calcutta. Let's dive a little deeper into even how Calcutta has evolved in the background to the brand evolving. I visited a few years ago for the first time. And my mother's from Calcutta, actually. Like, she grew up there and, went to school there. My sister was born there. But I only went for the first time very recently. And I felt like it seems to operate at its own pace. And you're doing something that is kind of bringing, a more modern take on, if it's fair to say, whether it's the textiles, whether it's the food. So how have you seen that interplay happen with what's happening in the city?
Somewhere, because we work with craft and there is focus on the processes behind it, the time that you have to give to let it, come together finally into something beautiful, you do have to spend that time. So in a sense, we are in that slow sort of business where we do have to kind of give it the right time. Like, for example, with embroidery, you have to give it a couple of months to make something that is fully hand embroidered and things. So that's always a struggle, because you have to stick to deadlines also for your business and your sales, but you also are working with artisans that have certain restrictions. But in terms of Calcutta evolving, I think when I started, everybody was tending towards more familiar food and, familiar spaces. Very few cafes at the time. And I think now in the last couple of years, people have become way more open to new cuisines and, spending that money to go out and have an experience. And I think when we started Sienna, every bit was also a part of the experience, not only the food, but we wanted to, have nice tableware. We were thinking about the interiors. So I think if you're offering a quality experience and the food is also, of high quality, then I think people will accept it, but it has taken Calcutta time. I think in the last few years, that's really changed. And now in that same neighborhood where there was just 2 spaces, we were across the street from Bailoom, which is a lovely craft store and cafe as well. Now there are hundreds of cafes and restaurants all like populating the area, which is, I think, a good sign because it also means that people are getting more and more open to the idea of eating out and experiencing different kinds of cuisine and not only traditional ones or things that they're familiar with. Because I think Calcutta for a long time has been known for the best biryani or the best puchka or, street food and, Pais hotels and not necessarily more contemporary food. So I think that's changing now.
It's not, I think you're being very modest about it because literally I think Sienna is top of everyone's bucket list when they come to, when they go to Calcutta. And that's not an easy thing to achieve. And yes, you answered part of it being that if you're offering a quality product, quality experience, that's what sort of fuels the interest in a brand. But I mean, is there more to it? Is there something that you've learned as being non-negotiable for you that's helped you put Sienna where it is on the map?
I think the biggest learning for me was that when I realized that there was potential in the F&B side, I started building a team of professionals and letting the experts also do what they do best and not delving into the food anymore because that's not what my expertise lies in. And I think that was a big step also for me because I had to let go of certain ideas that I had of what we wanted to do with Sienna. But now we've evolved into something really wonderful and we feel very proud that we can at least represent our region in some way. And luckily, we've been able to break that mold a little bit and people have given us that chance where I think for a long time, we've been considered expensive or, people don't think of eating Bengali food outside of their homes, for example. And we don't want to mess with traditional Bengali dishes. The idea is to keep representing the diversity of Bengal, not just Calcutta, but in a sort of unique way and to support the local ecosystem as well and local market. So I think that focus helped us grow into an organization where we can actually do those things now.
I think whenever you're doing anything new, I mean, that's been very similar to our learning curve that, when you want to introduce something new, it takes time for sort of acceptance and adoption. And you have to be patient and sort of, allow people to experience it and grow to the idea, I guess. So that sort of resonates very much with us and makes sense. So at what point in the last 10 years did you bring in the professionals, as you say?
So at some point we were given the opportunity to actually open a restaurant in Park Street, which is a more commercial area. And it was like a 5,000 square feet space. So suddenly we were, grappling with the fact of working with this team of, home chefs and, people who didn't really have that experience. And so right before the pandemic, actually, at the time, Revant was living with Orani, and that's when we decided, okay, should we bring on a professional team and should we start actually thinking about those big steps that we need to take to build a proper kitchen? So it was during that time that we took those steps and then the lockdown happened. And I think it was obviously terrifying because we had to let go of a lot of people, a very large team, but also simultaneously it allowed us to pivot a little bit because we basically were shut off from any sort of outside suppliers, except the only access we had to produce was local markets. And then we decided, okay, why don't we just do this seasonal menu, and we'll change the menu every week, and it'll be specials, and people sitting at home will also get a chance to try something new. And then we all actually also physically went and delivered it to their homes during this whole lockdown, where people were sending food also from the rest of the world, were sending their parents and grandparents food. And so we would, put up this WhatsApp message with a menu of the specials for the week. And that's when also, because we had that time, the chefs were sort of playing around with, recipes and dishes of all kinds. And Abhinandan and Koel came on board. We had a young team as well. So everyone was really, creating something new every week, and customers were waiting, excitedly for what's going to happen next week. And we continued that sort of specials menu as well through, like, after we opened as well. So I think it really helped us survive the pandemic also. I don't think we would have survived it unless we came up with this idea of doing the specials menu and pushing it out there and literally physically going and delivering it to people's homes.
You mentioned Revant a few times, and for those who don't know, he's your husband and business partner. Tell us a little bit about how that happened, and how do you all sort of divide the work between you all?
So we met through common friends, but it was at Sienna, and he tells the story of that I think he makes very dramatic, but but apparently he met me in this beautiful place that he was instantly won over with. But we basically became really good friends through Sienna, and also at the time he was working with a brand that has been started by our common friend. And so we were doing a lot of work together as well, like collaborating on different projects, because we're both working with artisans, we're both working with sustainable brands. And then 6 months of being friends turned into, something more. And then after we got married, I think we realized that we have very similar ideas of how we want to work with artisans and kind of promote craft. And I also really, really needed assistance on the business side of things, because I don't have a background in business management, and Sienna was growing into something much larger than I expected. So we decided to work together, and I think for me, it's like I was already working with my mother. So then I got my husband on board.
Tell us about that. I think you've literally thrown like the everything into the pot and let it stew. I barely managed to keep my marriage going with working with my husband. You've got your mother, and if I had to work with my mother, honestly, one of us would have killed each other. How does that equation? I mean, jokes apart, but and I mean, of course, your sister as well, even though it's remote. But how does that equation play itself out in reality?
Yeah, I think inevitably you don't have boundaries when you have personal relationships. We're constantly, I think, working on how to set up those boundaries, divide our work and delegate, and try to not get into each other's bit. I think that really helps. And I think it's like this dichotomous thing, because it's terrifying and there can be lots of conflict, but it's also really wonderful when you're sharing the good stuff with each other. You also have 100% trust in each other. So that stuff is wonderful. But I think it's just that constant navigating and setting up boundaries. I think I've learned that now over time, that we have to do that, because it's different with my mom, of course, because she's older. It's a different kind of relationship with Revant, because he's my contemporary almost. It's a different kind of conflict that we get into. I think with my mom also, over time, what's happened is I think she has more faith in me now. I can say that, hopefully. I think like a true Bengali mother, she's not very complimentary about things. But I think over time, hopefully,
that's where my mother gets it from. Now it makes sense.
I think hopefully she can be proud of what Sienna's become, and hopefully what I've contributed to Sienna. So I think our relationship has also evolved as Sienna has evolved. Now she gives me a lot of freedom and faith. I think she's just like the boss lady that looks over everything, that we report to once in a while. We let her know what's going on. And she's obviously one of our biggest only investors, and helps us through all of that, the bigger decisions. But the day-to-day, she gives us a lot of freedom. So now I think there's less chance for conflict.
I've read somewhere that the whole idea was also to give the women in that region an avenue, like you said earlier, right, to make a living. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's also translated into what you've done in the restaurant. Is that fair to say? Because you've got a pretty formidable female force in that kitchen. Good luck to Ravens and Navi. But no, it's really wonderful. Is that something that's like been a conscious effort, at least as far as the restaurant is concerned? Because that's not something that you see commonly in restaurants, and I think it's wonderful.
None of us really want to hire someone just because they're a woman, obviously. It's also based on the skill and the potential that a person has. But I think with, even though Abhinandan and Revant are the sole male leaders, they are extremely, open to, of course, working with women. In fact, they are always choosing the women. So I think it is a natural, it has happened naturally. And also with Koel as our head chef, I think the fact that Abhinandan and Koel share that responsibility, I think it really has a nice balance in the kitchen, because of course the presence of the female presence and energy is different than the male energy and presence. So I think that really has an effect on the kitchen, on the space. There's no toxicity. There's no, of course, a kitchen is always going to be a very chaotic, busy, hot place. But there is no, we try our best to not have any sort of abuse or, we're not putting people down. The idea is to grow together. And I think that definitely happens when you have female leadership. I think also over the last year, we've decided to incorporate like a flat structure, which we're still trying to figure out, to be honest, because that's not very typical. And what it does is it distributes the leadership roles a bit and the responsibilities you have, but it also, we're truly, really collaborative in every step, which can be chaotic because you're also taking many decisions into mind, like you're taking everyone's opinions. Yeah, too many cooks. So even with the content team, for example, we're incorporating everyone's opinions and feedback. Like Abhinandan and Koel, they're also a big part of what we do with content, or they always involve me in the food. So it's truly collaborative, and that, I think, of course, has its ups and downs. I think, as you said, too many cooks. But also, I think Sienna can never just be about an organization about one person in leadership. I think it has to be the contribution of several minds and ideas. I think people really genuinely like working with each other. Like, I think even on people days off, they are coming into work on their holidays and things, people want to spend time together. I truly think I like everyone at work, which is, I think, a very unique situation to have. And it's something I know that will probably not last forever, but it's also this wonderful ecosystem that we've created, which I think finally does contribute to a really nice working environment where hopefully there's no toxic behavior and there's no, the idea is we grow together. And of course, some people may leave and do something else with their lives, and that's great because we wish them the best. But I think Sienna is this living, breathing being that we're all contributing to. It's bigger than ourselves now, and I think that's really nice to know.
I think what you're saying is, in a way, it's having a sense of being valued and ownership of the brand without sort of, real ownership, so to speak. But there is that sense of ownership because everyone's voice is valued. We've all been there where, an integral part of the team moves on. You had your chef move on at one point. How did you deal with that challenge? Like, what were you going through then, and how do you look back at it today? What would you tell someone, basically, another restaurateur who's going through that? Because I know the first time's always the hardest.
Yeah, I think when you're doing something really great together and you're building something together, you get very close. And I think we were already friends. And so it always feels like difficult at first. But I think, again, because I feel that Sienna was larger than us individually, it just continued to grow and evolve the way it was supposed to. We were also going through a transition in terms of space. We are in this place where we're growing into something bigger again than what we had imagined. We're trying to push the boundaries a little bit with our tasting menu and things. So I think it didn't feel like it was sort of stopping us from achieving what we wanted to in any way. I think, people do want to move on because they have their individual plans and desires as well, and we have to sort of respect that, and we were comfortable with that. But of course, there's fear when something changes and when you feel that a dynamic or system is working well and you don't want it to break or change. But I think what it allows is also others to have ownership and have a voice, which I think wouldn't have happened otherwise. But also I think it's just a natural part now of growing as a business. I understand that. I think you had reached out to me also at that point, and I was so happy to see your message, because I know that you have been through that, and you've been through so many kinds of experiences, having been in the industry for so long. So I do look up to you, and inspire me a lot. So when I got that message, I was like, I feel stronger. But I realized that it's also part of running this kind of a business and organization. And as I said, people have, I also feel like people come at the right time for something. We had to build something at the time, and it was just the right time that we all came together and built this amazing thing together. We actually did really good work together, and I'm very proud of what we did, because it accumulated into something wonderful, and that child is still growing. I feel like we're adulting now.
Do you feel like that sort of triggered something in your mind, maybe, as to how who represents the brand? And yes, I understand the brand is sort of bigger than everyone put together, but
definitely, I think I didn't realize what kind of a spokesperson I would have to be for the brand, and just being naturally a very socially anxious and shy person, I'm not comfortable or used to just putting myself out there. But over time, I've realized that that's a disservice to the brand, especially because my mom and I started it. We do know best what it stands for and the core values of it. I think I struggle with both roles, being the spokesperson, but also being a leader, because I have to assert myself. That's another thing that I struggle with. So this is a very difficult role that I'm trying to figure out and maneuver through. But yes, I'm not comfortable with attention on myself at all. But I'm being pushed by Revant and my mother and all of the people who feel that I'm the one person who can represent the band in the right way because I started it. So
you started off, with a very artisanal idea in mind, and it's still very much that. But now I know you supply restaurants their crockery, and that's an amazing sort of growth to have happened. But how do you balance that need for scale and large scale production with the original idea of handmade craft?
I think when my mother started, she started it as a studio, but she had this foresight of also doing a larger production. So there are certain equipments and things that assist that kind of large orders and things. So what it did was it allowed us to create two verticals. One was the studio pottery that will always have that handmade look and touch, and it's also created by the master potters that we have in our organization. And the other section would hopefully cater to cafes and restaurants like ours. And I think we are trying to balance both. I think what the larger orders do is they fuel the workshop and make it sustainable, of course, and that helps with the studio pottery eventually. But I think we're still learning a lot about the material itself and the processes with the pottery, because whether it's the type of the clay body or the temperature at which we burn it, all of that it's very specific, it's very scientific, and all of that sort of depends on what we design depends on all of that. So if it's, daily use pottery that's going to be washed and used every few minutes or every hour, then we have to use high temperature body and things like that. So there are a lot of technical aspects to it, and we're still trying to figure that out. because that needs a lot of equipment. And our workshop is a lovely space, but it's also quite old. The machinery needs replacement, and it's all very expensive, and it's a huge capital investment. So we're taking those steps slowly. We're buying kilns, or we're getting experts on board who can help us with that, consult with us, and sort of help us with that. So we're doing both and trying to figure out how we can keep both verticals alive, because I think one fuels the other eventually.
I think, obviously with something like that, production and manufacturing, like scale is a little bit more, foreseeable. What about when it comes to the restaurant? Like, what does success and growth look like for you there?
Yeah, we've made our lives more complicated, I think, than we needed to. We've decided to separate the menus and the kitchens. It's helped us, I think, create just more high quality food. It's groups of people focusing on one menu and each menu, which just helps the end product, I think. But also what we've done is divided the concepts a bit. So the cafe serves classic, cafe style food that we always had, like pasta, salad, sandwiches, comfort food that people are used to having at Sienna. And on the first floor, which is the dining room, we're doing more Bengal forward food. So a little bit of what we used to do with the tasting menu, but more accessible versions and, like small and large plates, but basically made with all Bengal ingredients and recipes, not really importing anything or bringing anything from outside of Bengal and that. So it also allows us to be a restaurant and a cafe, which is something we've kind of struggled with because we were always a cafe and then seen that way as well. Eventually, I was telling you that we're going to launch our tasting menu as well in April, hopefully the end of April. So I think the reason behind dividing the three was also to be able to focus on each one in the right way, and also divide our teams as well, so that I just think what's happened is the quality has just improved a little bit and helped us sort of keep it consistent as well. So it is very complicated to explain to a customers walking through that, what would you like to eat? Would you like a pasta? Or would you like, Kilo hollandaise prawn? But I think now people are getting used to it. And luckily, the Bengal forward dishes are also getting more popular, which is what we want in the end of the day, I think.
So do you not have people who are on the ground floor saying, I want one of that from the first floor? Is that allowed?
Of course. And we don't want to be like headmistresses and masters being like, no, you cannot. But of course, we'll make those adjustments. But we also want people to give that menu a chance, because I think when you have classic comfort food, people tend to go towards what's familiar and comforting. But we want people to try the Bengal forward menu, because it's something that we really work hard on, and it's the whole idea of promoting the region is really important to us. So it's just accessible. It's an accessible version of what they're used to maybe eating, the flavors that they're used to.
So, and do you feel like Calcutta is kind of, because I've always heard that it's a very price sensitive audience. Is that changing? Like, have you seen that sort of, is that what the tasting menu is also partly a response to, because people are willing to spend?
I think it's always been, I think the percentage of people who have the spending power is less. I think also it's the pattern of spending. I think that's a little different than other cities. I think they're very specific about where they want to spend their money. I think value for money is an important aspect also. And I think although the price point is going to be higher than the dining room, Abhinandan and Koel are very clear about keeping it still accessible. I think the idea is we want to not make it like this exclusive thing that is only meant for one group of people. The idea is that you have access to really good quality food. Also, that's telling you something about the region. But of course, what comes with quality and the time that we're putting into it is a certain price. And I do think that's changed, though, in Calcutta over time. And I think, luckily for us, we've been able to break that mold. I think there's still criticism and conversations around some dishes being high-priced. But I think over time, people are giving into them, hopefully, because they feel like the experience is worth it or the dish is worth it. And we have a range of customers from like very young kids from high school who are coming and having the hot chocolate and the fries. and maybe are saving up to also have that for the weekend. But also, obviously, people my mom's age and generation who are very excited about this Bengal forward menu because they recognize these flavors and these ingredients, and they haven't seen it being presented in this way. And they are hopefully appreciating the fact that we're pushing the boundaries a little bit as much as we can without offending too many people, because Bengalis are very specific and about how they eat, and they put in a lot of care and focus on how they eat. So we also never want to mess with traditional food. That's not the idea at all. And also not being accessible is very important to us without reducing the quality or the quality of the experience as well.
Like not compromising
exactly.
anything. Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense. I remember on one of my trips to Siena, Oromi had kindly taken us on a bazaar tour, and that's very kind of ingrained in what you're doing. But it's not just about the produce and, the ladies sort of selling what's in season, but seafood is a big part of Bengali cuisine. What are like some of the, I guess besides this, the misconceptions about Calcutta that you want to dispel through what you're doing at Siena?
I mean, the way we eat, I think that's like a big aspect that we're focusing on, which I mentioned earlier, which I think is just expanding our horizons a bit about representing how everyone eats, not just sort of a group or a certain class of people or a certain group of people. I think that's like a big focus. And we want to keep changing that. I think that's why we're most excited to take these menus outside of Calcutta, because we want to also listen to people's feedback and ask them what their experiences are like. Because if you're not Bengali, then how are you sort of responding to these flavors? And I think that's a huge part, that just the diversity has to be represented a little bit more, and that's what we want to do. I think, of course, the craft aspect is really important as well, somehow incorporating the crafts in some way, because I think what's lovely is that we can design the tableware as well. So that's also something we want to work very closely with. I think also this idea that with Calcutta that everything is slow, and I did mention earlier that that is something that sometimes can be frustrating, but I think luckily at Siena there is never a slow day. I think we're full, which is, I think, a testament to the fact that people are open to new experiences. And I think the market also has to give them those experiences. And there are organizations like us who are working towards that, whether it's an Amar Khamar that we work with very closely, or, Bong Eats, who have archived Bengali food digitally. And, that just opens the world of Bengali food up a little bit more. And I think hopefully we're being able to change those perspectives a little bit through the menus that we are designing, and taking it outside of Bengal, I think, is really important.
What's your biggest challenge today?
So many challenges. Like a personal challenge, or like more like a...
Both. I mean, we can start with Siena and then feel free to share.
As an organization, we run two businesses almost, right? So I think that's a big challenge always, because one functions very differently from the other. And like my lack of business know-how sometimes makes that difficult. But I think with Revant on board, he's helped us organize the financial aspect a bit, and the way the business runs and the operations. And they're so different in terms of, because even in this craft side, we're not only, we work with organizations that work with artisans, and we also manufacture our own products. So even in that one business, there are separate segments. So I think that's our biggest challenge. Our P&Ls are different. Everything is different. So how to kind of grow both together in under one brand is probably our biggest challenge.
I have been asking for the longest time for whether there will be a Siena store, if not a restaurant, but at least the store in Bombay one day, or any other part of the country. I mean, do you see that as something on the horizon?
I think even that side is about collaborating. I think finding the right partner in a city that we want to open in is probably going to be the first step, because it's a still just a family-owned business. We're very protective about it, but also, and while we're open to growth in that when involving others, even in sort of the ownership aspect. But I think we're careful and cautious about how we grow, because of course we don't want to compromise on the core values, but also how we're functioning as a team. And with scale, as comes a lot of challenges, and we have to keep going back to why we started this in the first place and what we're doing and what we're trying to say. So I think Revant and we do really want to also expand the store side, because we feel, again, it's the same thing, the exposure and the fact that we can create more impact if that side of the business grows. Because it's like almost more than 50% of the organization is made up of artisans from all kinds of backgrounds. And the only way we can actually affect their lives is if the organization grows on a certain scale. But we would be very happy to open a store in Bombay if anyone will have us.
Well, I'm manifesting it. So there goes. Listen, it's been really great talking to you about all the sort of business and the serious stuff. But we've got a little rapid fire, which is more fun. So say the first thing that comes to your mind. What's the biggest food trend that you secretly can't stand? Not a secret anymore after you tell us, but
I think putting things in puchkas or like in golgappas.
That doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. So you'll have to deal with that. One dish you'd put on the Sienna menu just for yourself, even if no one else was ever going to order it.
I think I'm always struggling to put more healthy, salady things on the menu. And Abhinandan looks at me like, I hear you, but I'll think about it and I'll get back to you. I think a little bit more like wholesome, sort of clean, like just clean ingredient food, like salads and something like that, but I know will not be popular and no one will order it except me. But
I'll think about it, because that's what Jay does to me when his answers basically no, which I've now figured, but he'll be like, let me think about it and get back to you, which basically means it's a no. What's a hill you'll die on when it comes to design?
I think the sustainable aspect, like just not using plastic in our design, that's just been a real struggle in terms of cost, in terms of everything, accessibility, all of that. But I think that is something I just want to keep pushing. Even in the kitchen side, I keep pushing them to at some point work towards this. I know it cannot be fully sustainable. That's a really hard goal, I know. But I think that's one thing I keep pushing both aspects of the business to just be as sustainable as possible, because I think just in this environment to create a product itself feels wasteful in the first place, because we're constantly talking about, exchanging clothes or, like thrifting and things like that. And so when I'm creating a product already and I'm making it sustainable, because it is sustainable in terms of material, but production processes also like hurt the environment. So I think, maybe sustainability.
What you're doing in terms of just being mindful is, I think it's being mindful. What's your guilty pleasure Swiggy order from somewhere totally unlike Sienna?
My God, I can only think of Revant's right now, not mine. But I think
let's throw him under the bus.
I think it's KFC for sure.
I'm just kidding.
I mean, as a Bengali, we love like fried chicken, of course. But I think for Abhinandan and me, like every time we're traveling outside, either to Shantiniketan to design, it's always we stop at a rest area and we look at each other and we're like, of course, it's going to be KFC. I mean, there's no doubt. So I think that's probably a guilty pleasure that I give into sometimes.
Nice. Listen, it's been really fun talking to you, and you need to do more of this because it's just such a beautiful story, and it really is fantastic what you're creating and how you're putting, Bengal on everyone's radar. In such a amazing way. So you need to do more to put it out there. And but yeah, I love the restaurant, love your clothes clearly, and and kudos and good luck.
Thank you.
Everything
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.